market has been, our vacancy was pretty high in 2007. I'm sure some of you in the industry have experienced that. But you can see from the slide, San Mateo County is blue and Santa Clara is red, and Monterey County, which really incorporates Santa Cruz, we have not as much data on Santa Cruz, so we put Monterey County. We are starting to see that drop in vacancy. I'm sure you're experiencing it now. And really in 2011, we're probably looking at 2.8% for San Mateo County vacancy, 2.9% for Santa Clara County, and Monterey County is 2.6%. And then going to the next slide on rents.
Yeah.
Okay. As you can see, it mirrors the occupancy as we saw in 2009. We had quite a bit of the recession effects and rents really dipped. But we're coming back on a rebound, and 2011 we're seeing San Mateo County at about 5.5%, Santa Clara 5.6%, and Monterey County 2.4% on average.
Tom, where do you see things heading next year or so?
Well, make a couple of comments. You, in your introduction, you indicated that we do manage properties kind of all around the Bay Area. We do not manage anything in San Francisco, however. We've chosen to stay out of that market. My view is life is too short. Even though there are some good economics there, which I'm sure Christine may talk about. We manage a lot of B and C product, and also a very wide variety of types of product and sizes, from smaller sort of mom and pop properties, 16, 20 units, all the way up to 500 unit properties. And generally, I think everyone agrees, you've heard many times over, and you've probably experienced yourself, that we've been on an upward trajectory for the last year and a half or so. And I think, my company's not big enough to have its own economist or forecaster, but I think we're all optimistic that we're generally, going to stay on that trend as long as the job formation remains in on a positive track. I would only make the comment that over the last year or two, as I've seen the job formation statistics, they've been okay, and in some quarters modestly on the uptick, but the rent, the decreases in vacancy and the increases in rent seem to me to be stronger than what would be indicated by the actual job statistics. You probably also know that over time, and I think Larry talked about it in his presentation, the various vacancy rates in office buildings. There's parts of the peninsula in San Francisco where the vacancy rates have decreased to almost zero, and that's where we've seen the biggest spikes in rents. We also experienced in the dot-com boom markets, because of the jobs housing imbalance and the relatively overbuilding of office product and shortage of housing, that when the vacancy rate in the office product goes from 20% to even 15%, which we haven't seen yet in some of the markets, we'll see, even for that much of a change, we'll start seeing a much more pronounced effect in the vacancy and the rent movement in where the apartment product in those markets is. The only other comment I would make is there's obviously a lot of mini markets. Like, for example, we have a property in Alameda. It's a good, steady property. There's nothing wrong with it. But even during the dot-com boom, we never saw the big upswing in rents in that community. And when things went soft, it didn't go down that much. It tends to be a little bit steadier. So those would be my comments.
All right. As a public company, I can tell you what's happened in the past and not necessarily what's going to happen too much going forward. But we don't see dramatic changes in 2012 than 2011. Job growth in San Francisco and the East Bay, we expect that to accelerate some. We expect San Jose to stay moderate, but they had great growth in 2011, so we'll continue to trade on that. As everybody said, deliveries are low, so that's our biggest benefit. When we look towards San Francisco, which is one of our stronger markets, has been in 2011, and Tom said, I don't know if anybody read the Business Journal yesterday, but the headline is that south of Market has 0 vacancy rate on office space, which was pretty shocking. So, it just tells you that more and more people are moving to the city. And the interesting thing is some of the folks going to the city are high-tech companies on the peninsula that are looking for satellite offices in the city. So they're taking space, along with a lot of the big companies, such as Twitter is taking a ton of space up there. Pac-12 just took a bunch of space, I think 70,000 square feet south of Market, so which only corresponds good for the rental housing because the supply is so low there. So we do expect 2012 to be a strong year as as 2011 was.
We have about 7,000 units across the West Coast from Seattle down to Southern California, and there's no question Northern California is the strongest market. In Southern California, we're not seeing that big of a rent growth. We're about 2 to 3% and 95% occupancy versus Northern California, we're really at 97% occupancy. Seattle's a little bit stronger because of the tech corridor with Microsoft and Boeing, so we're seeing about 4% rent growth and 95% occupancy. But I wanted to just kind of finish the slide and show you the job growth. Is that on? I can't see the screen, so help me with this. So again, historically, you can see in 2009 we had the largest job loss, and now 2011, as everybody, all the government officials have told us, job growth has been very, very robust, with Santa Clara County at 29,500 jobs. So that's why we're seeing such high occupancy and rent increases. And then the next slide. Forecasting the job growth next year, 2012, looking at, again, Santa Clara being the biggest winner, over 20,000 jobs combined for the three counties, and 1,500 new units to be delivered in 2012. And finally, the rent growth that we're looking at for 2012, Santa Clara County, we're looking at 6.9%, San Mateo County 5.6%, and Monterey County 3.5%, with vacancies at 3 to 3.5%. So very, very strong market.
Right now, Northern California is the strongest market we have. Boston is tending to come right up there. I mean, Boston has been a great market as well. New York. DC will start to get a little shaky, we believe, as the years in the government changes. So that one. And we are, Chicago's, we don't have a large presence in Chicago, but the West Coast is going strong. Northern California first. Seattle, as Anna says, is very strong for us. In Southern California, we've recently acquired several, we think we might be up to 7 communities down there, just to help shape our B portfolio. We've picked up in the last part of 2011 6 or 7 communities down there. So the West Coast is certainly driving things at the moment.
We serve a broad sector. We have from Class A to Class C properties, or C+, B- properties. So we do see a broad range of renters. I'd like to touch on what we also have a development arm, and maybe that might be beneficial to just tell you who we're trying to target our market to. It's the young, under 30 professionals and the 55 plus empty nesters. And those are the people that we're finding that they want a carefree lifestyle. They don't want to hassle with anything. A perfect example is one of our San Francisco properties. We go in and change the light bulbs for everybody. So they really don't want to do anything related to housing. And then we build a lot of properties with a lot of amenities. We build in infill locations where it's close to entertainment, close to restaurants, close to transit, so that it's really all there for the resident. So that's our newer rental properties. That's the Class A. And in our B, C, we really are seeing a lot of engineers sometimes that are just from another country, and they're here for a couple of years on contract. They're very migrant. They're competitive in their rental, so a lot of negotiations. But that is the bulk of what makes up our B class properties in Silicon Valley.
I would say there's 2 things that people talk about that sort of come to mind. One is, and I think Larry and someone else touched on this, the number of units that are being developed in the sort of the North San Jose area, 2, 3, 4, 5,000, depending on what period of time you look at. People are always concerned what impact that's going to have on rents in the rest of the property, in the rest of the rental housing stock. And my feeling has always been, as long as the economy is relatively strong, we can easily absorb those. It's a relatively small percentage of the rental housing stock. But the other side of that is, as we talk about who those renters are, renting in the newer properties or the renovated B and B plus properties, we also have to keep in mind that the diversity of the people that do rent, and as an economy, we need people that are going to be working at Google and all these other kind of places. But we also have to remember that for every one of those folks, there's probably 4 or 5 or 6 or some other number of people who are working at fast food restaurants, oil change places, and all kinds of other stuff, and they have to live somewhere too. And when you think about that in terms of the age and the kind of rental housing stock we have in Santa Clara County, we can't forget about the rest of that kind of stuff and figure out how to make that work as well. And some of those folks are going to feel pressure and get displaced as the overall economy gets moves upward.
Avalon Bay, we've actually made a very concerted effort to look at the different kind of renters that will be coming into the market as we move forward. And just recently, we had a press release in December that we've actually created new brands to address the changing markets and the different demographics. We've put emphasis on a brand we now call Ava, which will be the Gen Y segment who are looking for urban neighborhoods, vibrant, maybe not necessarily your top A locations, but they're infill locations where all the energy is, where mid-market area, where Twitter is. We have our first one down in, kind of lower Nob Hill, which, really you want to call that the Tenderloin, kind of the backside of the Tenderloin area. And it seems to be very popular, very tech-oriented, very tech-savvy, much different product than a lot of us old-school property managers are used to. If anybody wants to tour, call me, because it's very interesting. Bold graphics, chalkboard paint apartments so they can write on the walls, and just very much more to that Gen Y segment. Then we actually created off a second brand that we are now calling Eve's brand, which is the value-minded, like Tom talked about. It's kind of that core brand. If you had to give it a segment name, it would be the B. It would be a B type of property that we'll do on redevelopments and purchase in locations that are great apartments for value-minded people. So that would be the second one. And then our third one would be Avalon, which is more of our upscale brand, which you see a lot of around here. But we understand that there's diversity in all of those areas, and we want to be able to capture that and work with those residents in giving them what they want in each brand. It's interesting. I think yesterday I was thinking about how it's all of a sudden took a giant leap forward. It seemed like it trickled in for a while and then just took this very fast leap forward. I mean, it comes from a lot of different varieties, from customer service, from your Yelp reviews, and all the things that people are saying goes from your office to Yelp within, like that commercial, within 52 seconds. Something you've said is now on Yelp. It has a lot of benefits. At our Ava brand, I mean, that's how people communicate. They service requests, all the documents we send, everything is electronic. They don't necessarily need or want the interaction with the office. They want to do it at their time, their pace, when they want to do it. So those communities are very well wired, and everything is out there for them to see. A lot of people use different programs, but packages, it's all listed up on a flat screen for them to go get. And in the evenings, we don't quite have an office anymore. We just lock everything up, and then it just turns into their social space, which, if you've read about any kind of incubation space, now starts to double as an incubation space, and that whole kind of brainstorming in that generation works very well. On the other brands, it's just the speed of how business is done these days. It just doesn't take as long to do anything, to send people stuff, to get things signed, and to get communication in and out, whether it just be how we speak to our residents and give them information. It's great to have Facebook. If you have a water shutdown in a building, you post it and people see it. It's like, wow, it's not asking this, our maintenance team, can you please deliver these 800 notices to all these apartments for shutting the water off? So it has benefited us in a lot of ways. But it does have a component to manage, because it's free speech. People can say what they want, right or wrong. It's their right to have their say.
I just attended last week a real estate conference in Florida where had a lot of the largest apartment operators from the country speaking, and this topic was the number one topic of all the panels that were discussed. And I would summarize what was said is there's 3 or 4 areas that people should be thinking about when you talk about social media, and most of us probably have only thought about 1 or 2 of these. The one that we probably are all aware of is just managing the comments that get posted about the properties and how you do that. I think most of the management companies, if they haven't already, have someone dedicated onto the staff that are figuring out ways to do that. And what they're generally trying to do, if they're doing it right, is get most of the discussion offline, and not sit there and try to have an online argument with people that you don't even know who they are. But the second part of that, or a second thing that people talked about, was whether social media, the role it plays in actually renting apartments. The consensus among a lot of these people is they really were having a hard time identifying how the use of social media actually translated into X number of leases signed over the way that they, had been doing it in the past. Now, I don't know if everyone in the industry would agree with that, but that was the consensus of this group. But the one notable exception was a couple of companies that were active in the student housing market, and they actually said there are ways they measure, and they are finding ways where that's actually translating into signed leases. The implication being is that group of people, that group of renters, ultimately moves into the rental housing field. Some of that stuff is going to happen, so that's probably a leading indicator of where we're going with that. And then another aspect of it was the use of social media for the residents that already live in a property. And I guess you'd call this the resident retention component, where someone, whether you're a chess club fan or a 49ers fan or whatever it is, people, whether it's a property-sponsored web page or a web page that's not sponsored by the property, there's apparently a lot of that going on, where people create a sense of community based on other interests that ultimately you would think would have a beneficial effect on the occupancy, because it's part of why you rent in a certain place.
And what we found is that social media has to be actively managed. You have to have somebody on site to manage that. So it's very time consuming, and the benefits are not necessarily there in terms of getting new residents, but certainly if you have a profile that tends towards the social media, it's very beneficial for resident retention. Now, in the student housing sector, I have talked to many people in the industry where social media can help you generate more searches. If you do SEO, search engine optimization, when you have social media vehicles, you can really get your search up to the top of your Google AdWords search, whatever. And so that is a benefit if you are in the student housing population. What keeps me up at night is really the safety of our residents. I worry about waking up and getting a phone call and something's happened to our property and something bad happened, and that's my worst nightmare. And really when we had the recession over the last 2 years, we did see an uptick in crime. And we really increased courtesy patrol. We added lights to really brighten up properties, and really limiting the access points to your properties, very helpful in limiting crime. And we have a very diligent effort on checking our life safety systems at our properties.
Tom?
I think what keeps me up at night is just the fast pace of change that we're all having to deal with, and how it specifically relates to the bottom line cost increases that we all deal with when we review our financials for our rental properties. And if you go, I'll just pick up a couple of them that are directly related to government, to what government does, and a lot of them are financially related. If you look at what costs are rising the most, there are things like water bills, sewer bills, and stuff like that. That's directly related to what local government does. You all are aware that we had a positive impact, the apartment industry, as well as a lot of other businesses, on workers' comp rates in the early 2000s, and where workers' comp rates were just out of control. And we got them lowered, and now they're starting to inch back up again, but it's not, at this point, something that alarming. A very controversial subject, and I think one that's not well understood, is the cost of health care for apartment owners. And I'm not going to say anything about what's happened in the last 18 months or 2 years, because there's a lot of strong opinions about that. But the fact is, healthcare costs have been spiraling out of control for over 10 years, and it is the single, besides the wages we pay employees, it's the single most expensive thing that apartment operators spend money on. So we can all have vociferous debates about what we ought to do about it, but we still need to fix it.
I think it's a little bit different, because we all kind of know the apartment sector right now for a short period of time is fairly predictable. We know supply is low. We know people are building. So in 2013, come back, and I'm sure our message will be very different than it is today. But we worry about a couple of things. The social media thing, trust me, I worry about, I wake up one morning and we've had 200 people that were on Facebook and now have had a party in one of the rooms at one of the communities, and we've had that happen. So things just blossom out of control at certain communities because somebody posts that they're having an event at your community, and we end up with a lot of people. So that's been a very interesting phenomena to kind of manage. We do worry about job growth and corresponding consumer confidence. We can only trade on low supply for so long, and if jobs don't come back, it will be a problem for everybody. And locally, I happen to have a lot of stuff in San Francisco, and we are concerned about the Occupy movements and what that may mean for the apartment industry. I mean, we've had what we feel could be some small touches with it. We've had people running through some of our buildings in the middle of the night pulling fire alarms. And when we look back at security cameras, they're not our residents. And so we have had little bits and pieces of it, but it could get worse. And if it does get worse, what does that mean? And how does that directly impact how rents are going and what people are saying? So that kind of all ties together. And something that we always talk about is rent control. And will that come back if rents continue to rise? What are the risks of that? So I think all those pieces are things that we often think about and have some concerns with.
Well, obviously, we've always counseled everyone, and hopefully you've all seen this in the magazine and other types of communication, to be very thoughtful when you're raising rents. There's a tendency when the market gets hot to want to get it all at once. And I've had conversations with a lot of our fee clients about, well, gee, when rents went down, they were knocking on the door, and I had to lower rents, and I get that. We all get that, but we also have to remember, if we go too fast in the other direction, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So we need to be just as thoughtful as we can and be ready to defend. Assume you're going to get a call from somebody, and you're going to have to explain it if you're going beyond a certain amount. And usually, that's the market. I'm sorry, goodbye. I'd like to move out if they don't like it. It's probably not the best response.
We try to shy away from that one too. I think be aware and be cautious. Folks are getting healthy increases, and I do think that will continue. And consumers, some agree with it and some don't. Sometimes people, it's kind of the cycle. Sometimes they get overhoused. When rents are low, everybody moves in, and then rents go up and everybody moves out, and it keeps going. So we've taken the approach, be aware, be cautious, but we will be, the cliche, cautiously aggressive, but that will be a goal that we used in 2011 and don't expect much different in 2012.
Do you see, no, please.
I just think caution again, but really being responsible as the owner. If you have long-time residents, they're probably way below market, and we have situations like that where we will spread the increase over a time period and not have a $300 or $400 increase all at once. We might spread it 6 months, first 6 months, and then the next 6 months go to the full load. So just being considerate to long-time residents, I think, is being responsible.
We look for another strong year. Limited supply is our friend right now, and I think that'll be our friend until about 2013 to 2014 when it starts to come back and things moderate. We have a good population of that 20 to 34-year-olds coming in. We have a lot of people that are definitely choosing to be renters by choice because the home purchase option is just not as lucrative as it used to be in the past. It's not a savings account anymore. It's not your future investment. So we're finding that we also have more people that are renting by choice. But I think it'll be another strong year in 2012, as 11 was.
Do you think that you'll have more, potentially that the homeownership market will ease up in 2012?
I think it depends where you are. I think as we heard earlier, some of the neighborhoods where schools are strong, prices haven't changed a whole lot. We certainly track our move-outs and our top 3 reasons. And in the San Jose market, for most of last year, it started to creep back up into the top 2 reasons why people moved out. It is not in the top 3 reasons in San Francisco or the East Bay right now. So I think if people have money, if they have available credit, it is an opportune time to buy a house. But I think it's going to take a long time because the housing stock is huge right now.
And Tom, are you seeing the same?
I think as the economy continues to heat up, we'll see the good news spread into a little bit wider area. Probably not as wide as I'd like to see it. I would just ask you to think for a second about other major metropolitan areas where there are employment centers, whether it's Chicago or Denver or Boston or even New York, where corporate campuses typically are 30, 40, 50 miles from the traditional city centers. you can't get a high-tech company to even think about Evergreen or South San Jose as it is right now. Morgan Hill and Gilroy might as well be in Kansas. So I would hope that it would spread out a little bit, but probably not as much as I'd like to see.
I agree with Christine. It's really 2013 that we'll see some new supply coming online. So 2012 is going to be very, very strong in terms of the apartment market. And the one factor in Northern Cal that sets apart Northern California from other markets is really the housing prices are so high in the Bay Area. So your down payment hurdle is huge. In Seattle, we've actually seen an uptick in home buying, and it is rising as a alternative to rentals. So even though the jobs are returning, we're going to still see some vacancies from home buying. But I really don't see that in Northern California, so really strong market.
From my perspective, I think San Francisco is going to be the strongest market. Low supply, people are, office space is going down, people are moving, and you certainly can't toss aside the America's Cup, which we're already starting to see. People, corporations wanting apartments, and the infrastructure that they're going to need to build out to start supporting that event is huge. It's the third largest sporting event beside the World Cup and the Olympics. So they expect racing to start this fall. So we do expect to see, economic boost in the hospitality and apartment industry. Just people who are working there that need a place to live while they're working to do all that. So that, to me, is pretty exciting. Twitter moving into the mid-market area is a great boost for the city. And many other people are looking to move into San Francisco, especially the mid-market, to take advantage of the payroll tax abatement that they're giving for the time being. So I see San Francisco to be one of our big markets. The East Bay, I think, is coming along. I think the job growth will accelerate in the East Bay, but it will, as it has in the past, it will continue to be a little bit slower behind the others. And I do believe San Jose had a great year last year. I think it'll moderate a little bit in 2012, but will continue to be strong.
Tom?
I'd like to answer that question more from the investment purchase side than from the rental side. At the conference I was at, they were comparing investment real estate cap rates across the country, and as Larry and others have said, San Jose is the hot market. Properties in the hottest parts of those hottest markets, San Francisco, Palo Alto, wherever else you want to identify, as well as Seattle, are trading in the low to mid 4 cap rates, and that's dramatically different than less hot areas of the rest of the country. So for the people in this room and the people that are associated with my company that are looking to buy property, we're not trying to buy in Los Gatos or Palo Alto. Those kind of deals are probably not going to be very many of them. We're just looking for things that are, where we can find a property, do something with it, upgrade it, and still consider long-term goals. And we're going to probably shy away from the areas that are considered less desirable. And anywhere in the middle, we're happy to look at.
Well, the markets that we look at are similar to what I mentioned earlier. Is really the urban centers. San Francisco being very, very vibrant, and really people are looking for entertainment. Santana Row has been a wonderful thing for San Jose. So Mountain View has a great downtown, lots of entertainment going on. So those are more of these cities. I would focus on those cities that have very vibrant downtowns and social entertainment.
Any cities where you think you're going to struggle?
Not really in the Bay Area.
Well, again,